sort of felt like I was writing an episode of 24 or something.
Hi, I'm Deborah Crombie, and I write a series of British crime novels featuring Superintendent Duncan Kincaid and Inspector Gemma James. And a good part of the books are set here in Notting Hill, where I am right now. Well, I've been an Anglophile since I was a little child, and I lived in England and Scotland, and I went back to the States to live, and I was really, really homesick for Britain, and so I think that's when I wrote the first novel. It was partly because I wanted to be here in my head, and the books are set in Notting Hill, or at least a lot of the books are set in Notting Hill, because by happenstance I stayed in Notting Hill years ago and have a good bit since then, and I know the neighborhood really well, and I thought it would be a good place for my characters to live, so I moved them here. Not really. I wanted, Duncan sort of came first. I think I heard his voice in my head. I just knew what he sounded like, and I knew where he was from, which is Cheshire. He's not from London. And I knew how he thought and how he went about things. And Gemma, and I thought it would be interesting for him to have a female partner. And Gemma I invented, I think, as somebody that was a little more different from me than Duncan was, but she's, over the course of 12, 13 books, she's taken on her own characteristics and has developed into, I think, a really, really strong and interesting character. They both have. It's been very interesting to see what happens over the course of the books. No, I met with somebody the other day that said, "Oh, you must have had the whole story arc in mind when you wrote that first book." I said, no, they start out as professional partners, and then over the course of the series become personal partners, but it wasn't something that I planned, and it came with lots and lots of difficulties, and I think that keeps things interesting.
I'm sort of continuing my love affair with Victorian architecture from Sound of Broken Glass, the previous book, because writing about the Crystal Palace, which was just amazing, and then this book actually, the thrust of the action of this book takes place in St. Pancras International Railway Station, which is one of my favorite places in London. It's one of my favorite places anywhere. And a lot of this came from, well, I knew sort of what I wanted to do with the continuing story. I wanted to set a book in St. Pancras because I just absolutely love it. I think it was the crowning achievement of Victorian architecture. And it's just so interesting historically because, it was the great Victorian thing, and then it kind of slowly went downhill, and it was bombed during the Second World War, and it got seedier and seedier, and, then there was a point where they talked about just tearing it down, and then a big group of British preservationists led by John Benjamin really campaigned to have the station saved, and then they decided to make it the Eurostar terminal, and it's just gorgeous now. Well, I've moved Duncan. He doesn't know why. We don't know why. We're not going to find out why in this book. I promise we'll find out in the next book. But he's no longer working out of Scotland Yard, and he has been transferred to an area murder investigation team for the Borough of Camden, which works out of Holborn Station. So he's not getting on all that well with his new team. Duncan is not used to not being liked. Duncan is a bit of a charmer, and he's used to working with the same people, and it's different, and it's not very comfortable. And besides the fact that it's kind of a demotion, and he doesn't know why he's there. And at the same time, Melody, who got together with Andy Monahan, the guitarist in The Sound of Broken Glass, Andy and his singing partner Poppy are playing a concert in the concourse of St. Pancras Station, which they do in March. St. Pancras really has stuff like this, and so Melody is going to listen to Andy and Poppy play, and she sees a group of sort of grubby eco-protesters, and then somebody goes up in flames. That's what Duncan has to deal with. And in the meantime, Gemma has a case in South London that actually I wanted to give to, and Gemma had the main case in the previous book, in The Sound of Broken Glass, and in this one, it's really the main case is Duncan's. And I wanted to give Gemma a case that would have a kind of emotional resonance with, so that when they're talking about these cases, something that she learns in solving her case helps him see who the murderer is in his case. Not because the crimes are similar, but because there's a similarity in the way the personalities of the murderers operate. So I gave Gemma this case, and then I realized I was going to have to solve it. Oops. And it was hard. This book was challenging. There's a lot, everything happens in 4 days. So it's a very tight timeline. I sort of felt like I was writing an episode of 24 or something. So everything had to count. And there's all these different storylines and characters, and everything had to just be blocked together. I hope I pulled it off. It's March, it's miserably cold, and Gemma gets a call at work from Toby and Kit saying that, and their house backs in Notting Hill backs up onto a communal garden. And the boys are telling her that they have found a starving mother cat with 4 newborn kittens in the gardener's shed in the communal garden. So one of the threads running through the book is what is going to happen to the kittens. And something that happens with the kittens actually does tie into the plot. And so when my editor, Carrie, kept saying, enough of the kittens, and I kept saying, there's a reason for the kittens. There really isn't a reason for the kittens. I do know more or less what happens in the next book. I just have to get some uninterrupted time. Yeah, I need, and I'm on a 5-week book tour now, and then I just need to go home and shut myself in a room and not talk to anybody for a couple of months. Well, fingers crossed. And I see writing as very sort of right brain, left brain, where the plotting part of it and working out the timelines and the storylines and all that is very sort of left brain. And then once I actually start writing, and things change when you actually start, for me anyway, when I actually start writing, and characters walk onto the page that I didn't expect and say, I want to be in here and I have a story. And my friends who just sit down and write, their thinking process just seems to be really different. I'm really good friends with the Todds, who had Charles and Caroline here, and because we have the same publisher and we get to do events together, and I just adore them. I was a fan long before I knew Charles and Caroline personally, but that's how they write. And Caroline will say, well, we don't know who did it until Rutledge does or Bess does. And they just kind of, I think in one sense it's easier because they have a single viewpoint, both in the Rutledge books, which are third person, and the Bess books, which are first. But I think it would be much easier if you have a single viewpoint, and you could just sort of follow what that person does and find it. But mine, because of the multiple storylines and viewpoints, they're just too complicated. I take lots of pictures. Well, my idea when I first started the series all those years ago was if I had a Scotland Yard superintendent that got to go, sent to, and this was kind of in the P.D. James Adam Dog Leash mode, that if I had the Scotland Yard detective that was sent to different places to investigate murders, then I would get to go to different places, which actually was a pretty smart thing to do, if not entirely realistic. More so in those days than now, where almost everything is handled by area teams, which is one of the reasons why I moved Duncan to an area team. And besides, it was fun to bring in a new cast of characters. But no, I pretty much go and walk the walk where the books are set. I thought I have got to go and do a recheck on all my settings for this book. I ended up walking 10 miles that day, and I was just shattered because I was carrying stuff, but I was so glad I did, because it just, it made everything that I was writing about just really come to life again, and because it's been a while since I've been there, and then as I was writing, I could go back and I could fill in all the little details and the names of some, the cafe name had changed, and the internet is wonderful too. I have to admit, it's a lot easier. I mean, what did we ever do before Google Earth?
I don't know.
But I love the research part of it. And I've done crazy things like rowing
Yeah, that was a whole
and
other
Scotch.
set.
How do I keep track of it all the characters? Not very well. If I had known what I was getting myself into with the very first couple of books, I would have done what are called Bibles, where you write down every character in every book with their names and their physical descriptions and where they come into the story and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't know that, and I didn't do that, and now it's like I have to go back through books and say, now, what was that character's name?